Memtet? Okay. V'yizayer shelo levayesh adam v'lo yitztayer b'dvarav. A person should be very careful that he doesn't embarrass another, nor cause pain, anguish to another. If a person's sitting with somebody who's got some blemish, thanks for translating that word yesterday, now it's at the tip of my tongue. He's got some blemish on his body, and he's embarrassed by this mole on the tip of his nose. Or there's some blemish in his children or his wife, that he is embarrassed of. Or there's some blemish in his family. Here, don't think it means a physical blemish. I think it means maybe, something having to do with
emotional, spiritual.
Yeah. You should, of course, be very careful, sensitive, not to speak about this type of blemish or this type of shortcoming. Even if he's not speaking about him. Even if he's speaking about somebody else who also has this blemish, this shortcoming. Because he'll always think he's speaking about him. Even if it's, I would add, it would seem to me, even if it's clear to him that he's not speaking about him. But he would simply feel uncomfortable about somebody speaking about another person's blemish when he himself has that blemish. I'm trying to think of, maybe an example of this. But I'm having a hard time coming up with anything other than a scenario where you might have, let's say, a convert. Now, Geros conversion is a wonderful thing if the person is doing it l'shem shamayim and he's a sincere and honest convert. But some people look at it as problematic. I don't know if I'd go so far as to say a blemish, but it really is that way. Some people are proud of it. Some people publicize it. Some people feel like they wear it like a badge of honor, and there's certainly something to be proud of, right? But other people, maybe it has to do with personality, feel like they would much rather just smoothly fit in with everybody else and not be different in any way, or at least not in that way. And they don't make a big deal about publicizing. On the contrary, they might keep it private or secret, yeah? Now, if a person starts talking about, let's say, Gerim or something like that, so that might be a problem. For example, if as a rabbi in the yeshiva, sometimes people come to classes, they might not even be Jewish. That's another example. They might not be Jewish. It happens, for example. The mother's not Jewish and the father is. And they were raised Jewish, but halakhically speaking, they're not Jewish. And the rabbi's in the class, and as is obviously, this happens often, and a discussion about Jews and non-Jews can arise. That's a problem. So if you were to know, or the other students knew, that there was a person who had an issue about the pedigree, his not being Jewish for this reason, for example, and started speaking about non-Jews, so that could be upsetting to such a person, right? And a more subtle example, which is what I started talking about, would be one of conversion as well. Somebody's talking about Geros and Gerim and this and that and the other. They do help, they don't help, they do so this, that, and the other. They're just raising the discussion around, even if it's clear to the person who's a Ger Tzedek, they're not talking about him, but they're talking about the issue. And if he's embarrassed by it, something he doesn't publicize, so that could be. I think that might be a common example of the type of thing that we're talking about. A person did some unacceptable act, and then he did tshuva. You should be careful not to speak about that act in front of that person. Even not in front of him, I don't think you should speak about it. It could be lashon hara. But you shouldn't say it even a joke. Wow, how could you have done such a thing and not been more careful? Yeah, that would be one thing. Another thing, wow, and to think that 2 years ago you were doing that, and look at you today. Yeah? Thanks for the compliment. You could compliment me without reminding me where I was 2 years ago. I didn't intend to disrespect you. I apologize. I just meant to, So how do they say? The path to hell is paved with good intentions? Yeah? You're going to compliment him for where he is, fine, but you don't have to remind him or let other people know or remind other people where he was. Somebody says something to you that you already know. Be quiet. Let him finish. Right? Oh. Yeah, I know that. I know that story. Oh, I know that halacha. Guy, he wants to tell you. He wants to, if he's a show off, and he's just trying to whatever and all of that stuff. So we're more likely to kind of, try and put the person in his place by saying, everybody knows that already. But in a normal scenario, somebody comes to tell you something or some Dvar Torah and you already know it before. So act as if you've never heard it before. That's being deceitful. You give the impression that you've never heard it before when you really have. The answer is that's not true. You have never heard it before. You've never heard it from this person in the way that he would say it before. So this is the first time you're hearing this.
Yeah. Also, these stories sometimes you can hear the same story and a few details are different. So you might actually be hearing the original second time around.
Right.
Or a better version.
Right. If it's a story, it's a Dvar Torah. And particularly if it's a Dvar Torah, I've heard that before. Yeah, I know that. But when they play like your favorite Rolling Stones song in the radio, your Beatles song, you shut off the radio. I know that song. No, you relish it. Right? Yeah. So I'm speaking to the camera. So lahavdil, you hear lahavdil. Yeah. When you hear a Dvar Torah, so you've heard it before, but since you relish Torah, you're more than happy to hear it again, just like an old song. Lahavdil.
You might have a different conclusion as well. So what you originally learned from this Dvar Torah that sounds very similar, at the end of it, he might give you a whole new chidush.
Yeah.
So it might
Yeah. He says it a different way. He might add a separate twist to it. He might add a detail. He might, say it in a way which somehow affects you in a way which is different than the way you heard it differently. You might be a different person now than when you heard it then. There's all types of ways in which this can be a chiddush. Even without all of that, you should still listen and not cut the person short in order not to use your words in a way which would be harmful. All the more so when, like I said, you can find all types of novelties in something which you might think you know already. What were you going to say? Yeah.
A few days ago, you were talking about the example of the soft tongue.
Yes.
I don't know, I was really excited. I was like, I don't know if I said anything or interrupted you, but you realize that, and you're like, oh, you've heard this before. It turned out that the one that I read, actually in this book, is a similar story, but a little bit different.
How was it different? Or what was the story in the book?
The rabbi said, was serving tongue to the students and told them, just like you take the soft part of the tongue and you eat it, you should speak softly with your tongue. But the story in this book was the servant bringing soft tongue and hard.
Right.
And they're just two different choices.
Right. Similar idea, but they're actually different. Right. A good example. So therefore, let him speak. Let him finish speaking. Because in the end of the day, maybe he will give you some new spin which you didn't know initially. And he also derives benefit from telling you something. So why not do him the chesed of letting him feel good about telling you this thing, which he might be excited about because for him it is new. And even if you know, right, like I said, even if there were no novelty in it, still you should be quiet and let him finish. If you had two people who argue with one another, and then they made up, neither of them should say, you did that to me. So I did that. Don't remind him, and don't accuse him, and don't stir up the pot. Even if it's not his intention to go back and argue about it. So why raise it? Why point it out? Since he says this, you did this to me. What are you talking about? You don't remember? It was your fault. So the whole fight will got to start all over again. It happens among couples. Often, they have some difference of opinion, they get a little tit-tat, a little argument. Somehow they bowl it over, they make up, somebody apologizes or explains or whatever, and often each side will kind of feel like, oh, well, he or she accepts that, what they did was wrong, and hopefully they won't do it again. All of a sudden they do it again, and you said you weren't going to say that, you weren't going to do that. I said I was going to do that again. You're the one don't you remember? You're the one who was wrong, and you said you apologized. No, I didn't say that. And then before you know it, the whole thing goes spilling out of control again. Don't bring it up. Don't make an issue out of it. And even if the fight, the flames of argument are not kindled, still, Yevayeshehu Shepasha. It's still, going to possibly embarrass him if in fact he was the one who was wrong. So there's no point in reminding people of past misdeeds and things like that. Well, you just hurt a person. There are those who will sit before a wise person and be quiet, and they'll receive reward. For example, if he's intending to listen. And there are another scenario where a person would also be sitting quietly before the wise man, but that would constitute doing an avera, a transgression. Why? If he's thinking, what I'm going to say before him, since he doesn't know how to respond to me properly anyway. He doesn't know, compared to me, anything. So what's the point of asking? Again, you have to say this time about a specific scenario, because if, for example, somebody's saying something and you have a question, but you have every reason to believe the person can't answer you, so then why ask and risk embarrassing the person? That's true. Here he seems to be saying, the reason why I'm being quiet is it's not even worth asking him. What can he possibly answer that I don't know? Yeah, that I think that's the type of scenario that he's describing. As the sages of blessed memory said, Shiva dvarim begoylem, v'shiva bechacham. 7 matters by basically a log, a lump, a person who just doesn't have any knowledge at all. V'shiva bechacham, and 7 by a wise man. Chacham einu medaber b'fnei mi shegol mimenu b'chochma u'v'minyan. A wise person doesn't speak in front of somebody who is wiser or older than him. And he doesn't cut a person off in the middle of his speaking. And he doesn't answer immediately. Why? Because he deliberates before giving an answer. And another reason that's given why a wise person deliberates before answering is because if he answers like right off the cuff, so it might make the person feel like he's asked a stupid question. It's so obvious he shouldn't have asked. But if the wise man waits a second, so it gives the person a feeling, he's asked a good question. The wise person also asks on target, and he answers according to the halacha. And he also answers in order. He talks in order, right? Person asks question 1, 2, 3. He answers 1, 2, 3. Unless he wants to answer the other way around, then he'll say, "I'll answer you, but I'd like to answer in reverse for a reason." 3, 2, 1. But generally speaking, address the points as they were addressed. Val ma shelo shama oimer. And that which he doesn't know, he didn't hear, he should say, "I don't know." You can't just much it, make it up. You're asking a very good question. I can think of several possible answers, but none of them seem satisfactory to me. So I don't really have a satisfactory answer to your question. Better ask someone else, perhaps. Yeah, that's 5, I think. Which he doesn't know. He should say, I don't know. But model emes, and he should agree in the truth. So he says something, it's proven wrong, right? A Talmud Chacham says, you're right, I was wrong. V'chilufeihem, I got up to 6. It should have been 7. And the opposite goes with the foolish person, right? That what? He speaks in place of people who are older and wiser than him. He interrupts people. He answers haphazardly. He asks questions which are totally irrelevant and off the mark, right? He doesn't answer or address the points in order, yeah? And things that he doesn't know, he makes it out as if he knows it, yeah? And even if you prove him wrong, we're up to 7 now. He'll never admit you're right.
Sounds like politicians.
Yeah. Omar Hechocham. It was said by the wise man. Misha medaber b'chochma, up to Kuf Nun, page Kuf Nun at the top. Misha medaber b'chochma u'beheskel kamelech b'tavshil. A person who speaks with wisdom, intelligence, that's like salt to food. It brings out the good flavor, the good ta'am in something. V'yeshchen nedivrei hanevoinim kanoifech b'mishpatzor sahav. And it's find pleasure for those who understand, like a stone which is properly set. You know, properly set in a piece of jewelry. You find that idea sometime in Torah teachings. Like, what's the significance of that? A jewel that's properly set. And I suppose if you take something as precious as gold and something as precious as a diamond, and you go through all of the necessary work you need to, because of the value of these things, to fashion the metal and to burn off the dross and to put it, make the proper shape, and to take the stone and to hew it and to cut the facets and all that, right? The final finishing touch is to set it in its setting. If it's off, even just a little bit, it like loses all of its value. What's the whole point of taking those precious metals and that precious gem and going through all of that and then setting the stone askew? It just doesn't look right. So something's not right here. That's bent or something's out of shape. So the same thing here. You have all of the value and the beauty of Torah to kind of and set right. It just loses its purpose. Chochmas misken bezuya udvarav einam nishmoim. The wisdom of a misken, it could just mean a poor person, a person who's destitute, are despised, and his words are not heard. They're not listened to. That's what it says in Koheles. Does he have wisdom? The only problem is that he's poor. That's the point. Or does it mean? I'm not sure. I mean, he's poor of knowledge. V'yosim dvarav befiv shel chacham v'oshir kedei lahashmiya. You're saying, let's say a poor person or a simple person, or a person who doesn't have any particular, let's say, recognition in the community, should really avoid saying things of importance because nobody's going to listen to him. It would be better if he whispered his words into the ears of the rabbi and let the rabbi say it.
Like in politicians, they say, if the opposition came up with a solution to whatever crisis is going on, people in power can't use it because they would be admitting that the opposition is correct.
Right.
So anything that they do is actually worse for the country. I think I heard that somewhere once.
Yeah.
It was a similar idea.
Because they're just refrain from using it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's an interesting point. Okay, you're adding a layer to it which I didn't see initially, which is not only is there a possibility that people won't listen to him because of his station, but if it came from him, it must not be right. And therefore, and that's what people think. That's not necessarily true, but that's what people think. So it's actually better to tell somebody else to say it, so that people will, because if it comes from him, then they're going to think it's wrong. And therefore he says, "V'yosim dvarav b'fiv shel hacham." Such a person should put his words in the mouth of the wise man or of the wealthy person, kedei lahashmiya, in order to make them heard. Aval hu yishtok, but he should be quiet. That's interesting, huh? What's wrong with his espousing the idea? No. If he's not in a position that people will respect what he says, so he's actually doing a disservice to the community by saying it. Then he'd be quiet.
That's assuming what he's saying is very wise.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you have to say that, yes, what he's saying is worth being said. It's just, right, the worth of it is going to be diminished if it's said by him. So that's a scenario where a person should be prepared to be quiet and let it be communicated by somebody else who's more likely to be taken seriously, for example. We're not used to thinking that way. What kind of things do they think? Well, look, it's a good idea. On the contrary, this might be my foot in the door. That's a time to demur and have somebody who's already in a position of power gain more recognition from my idea. On the contrary, right? We would rather say, no, I'm going to keep this idea quiet to myself and say it when it's appropriate in order to get the recognition for it. And I think from a Torah perspective that would be acceptable. So perhaps what he means here is when it's, let's say, there's going to be something of value, not necessarily for himself, but for the community, right? For the community. So out of his interest in the benefit of the community, he's going to get more for the mileage of his words if it's said by somebody else. But not necessarily that he would have to forego some opportunity or benefit to himself for this. Klalo shel davar, the general rule of thumb here is, ha'odam ha'oisei deles the pischo, a person who makes a door for his entrance. Yesh lo es liftoach ve'es lizgor. There are times, of course, where it's appropriate to open the door, and times when he should close it. Kach yizgor dalsei piv, so he should know when to close the doors of his mouth, his teeth, his lips. Ki yesh shnei dlatos, there are two doors. Hasvasayim v'shinayim, the lips and the teeth. V'zoy medod liftoach picho, be very careful when you open your mouth. Ushmor l'shonnecha, guard your tongue. Kmo she'tishmor kesef v'zahav, like you'd guard silver and gold. Umargolios, or pearls. V'chadrucha b'soicha teva, in your room, in the house, inside a box. Yeah, so just like you would protect your pearls in a box within a room, so your pearls of wisdom should be stored within a box that's your closed teeth, right, in a room with your lips closed. V'tasei mizgeres the mizgeres, make a frame for the frame, a boundary for the boundary. Kach tasei lepicho, so you should do with your mouth as well. See how the early pious would be careful and to avoid unimportant speech all of their days. And this is also is very, very helpful for learning to pray b'kavana, with intention. Because most of a person's difficulty in concentrating in prayer has to do with the fact that his mind, and more importantly, according to what he's saying here, his mouth is all over the place during the rest of the day. So when you're scatterbrained and you're talking about a million different things, then when it comes to prayer, there should be no surprise that the person's mind is very difficult for him to focus. But if he is controlling himself and he avoids talking about all types of nonsensical, unimportant things, then when it comes to prayer time, his mind is free and unoccluded from all this other stuff. Yeah.
If that's true, that means quiet people have more kavana when they pray?
It depends on why the person's quiet. But yeah, I guess that's true. That I mean, you can have a quiet person whose mind is racing a mile a minute.
Right.
So, but I guess the point is, in general, that when a person's involved in many different things and he's speaking about these types of things, perhaps it's just the power of doing and speaking engraves these things within him even more so than if he was just thinking.
Right.
Let's say he really was thinking about these things, but he wasn't actually doing them or speaking about them, just thinking about them. So maybe he would be less under the sway of those thoughts than somebody who's actually acting on the thoughts by saying or doing something about it. But I think from the context here, he's talking about if a person refrains from speaking about these things, the understanding is because he doesn't want to be engaged in, so he won't be thinking about them either. I think it's fair to say that we're talking about a case where, yes, a person is quiet and doesn't talk or think about these types of things, so when it comes to prayer, his mind is going to be much more clear, unoccluded, and focused. Silence is also very good for attaining the attribute of Yirat Shamayim. Because you can't be Yirat Shamayim if your heart is all full of other things. That's very interesting. So let's say he loves God, he loves the Torah, he likes learning Torah as well, but he also likes music, and he likes literature, and he likes fine wining and dining and restaurants. Yeah, so his interest and involvement in all these other things is going to inevitably distract him from his Torah and his prayer. You got to call a spade a spade. The more interest and involvement a person has in things which are outside of the Torah, so the more this interest is going to encroach on his interest, his ability to be engaged in Torah and Tefillah. Does that mean a person has to cut himself off from all of these things? Ideally, perhaps yes, if he can, but most people are likely to become neurotic if they were to do that. Some are able to do that, and if they're able to, that would perhaps be the ideal. But realistically, you have to maintain some type of a balance for most people, and all that balance is going to be different from person to person. So a person might need a little bit of a break if he likes music, to listen to music, if he likes literature, as long as it's clean literature, to perhaps read a little bit of literature, or if he likes a fine restaurant, so when it's his birthday, like it is mine today, then he might decide to go out to. Yeah, it's actually my secular birthday. That doesn't count. Look, if you want to give me a cake and a present today as well, I won't deny. I won't refrain from taking it. Yeah. But the point is, he wants to take his wife out to a restaurant. Right? That would be a nice thing for her birthday, for their engagement, or something like that. Yeah. But to avoid, indulging in these things, and the truth is, since for many people, it's a lot easier to let's say, enjoy, find more instant gratification in these types of things. If he dabbles in them just a little bit, and from time to time, he has to be very careful that he's not slowly but surely drawn into them because they're, let's say, immediately more interesting or gratifying sometimes than, let's say, learning about Yevamos, which is one of the most difficult tractates of the Talmud. So you have to be careful and find the proper balance, which doesn't necessarily mean 50-50. It just means finding the proper measure of each. Yeah. Now it's time to introduce you to 4 different categories or groups of folks who do not merit to gaze upon the divine presence. I think this is the paragraph that he referred to earlier where he said he will elaborate them on at a later point. Litzanim. He says, Litzanim, those are the scoffers. Those are the people who just make nonsensical right, comical thing of everything. T'chsiv, Moshach yadoi es loitzetzim. God withdraws his hand from those who are scoffing and mocking and so forth and so on. So you see from here, right, God has nothing to do with these people, in which case they'll never see God. That's the first category. Kas doiver sheker, the second category are those who speak falsehood. T'chsiv, doiver shikorim lo yikoin leneged einai. One who speaks lies will never be established before my eyes. Kas chanefim, the third category are the
Angry.
no, the chanefim, the the flatterers. Yes. T'chsiv, ki loy lefanov chonef yavo. Not before him will the flatterer come. So a flatterer will not come before God, will not be brought before God. We spoke in detail about what that means regarding the flattery. Kas mesaperet lashon hara. The fourth category are those who speak lashon hara. It says, ki lo kel chafetz reisha oto lo yigurcha ra. You are not a God who desires evil. Evil will not dwell with you. And here the understanding is that the evil is referring to the evil tongue. Yes? Lashon hara. Va'ata yesh lehaskilcha iskehem ulechalek chelkehem ki yesh to'eles harbe la'avin o inyan al brio. Now we should elaborate on this because there is great benefit in elaborating on working on these things, because we're all subject to this type of a thing. Mocking, jeering, making fun of, or of, for example, flattery, speaking lashon hara, right? Falsehood, lies, even if they're white lies. These are all things that we kind of are presented with all the time. Well,
White lies are not okay, right?
what's that?
White lies are.
No, white lies. White lies are still lies.
Are there any instances where they're appropriate?
There are instances where a person is allowed to lie, and it might even be a mitzvah to lie. But in general, saying falsehood is wrong. What's that? Yeah. Person's allowed to lie, for certain things. For example, what's that? No, that's not one of them. If a person, the Gemara discusses, for example, if a person says, how many sectas have you learned? You know Ksubis? No. That's not, and again, you can really have in mind that it's not a lie, because how can you really gauge what learning is? Have you learned all of Shas? No.
Right, there are like 3 instances, right? In other words, like when you go to dinner to someone's house, how's the meal?
Yes, right. Another example is Bushpiza. Like he says, if you're a guest at somebody's house, you're not allowed to go, how was it? It was okay. Yeah, you shouldn't say it was bad, it was okay.
Rabbi Ullman's meal was the best. You should definitely go.
Yeah, and then everybody starts knocking on your door, calling you up.
That's the reason why you want to.
Yeah.
Well, so you're not allowed to say that it's good. If it's really good, you shouldn't say it was really good.
It depends.
You have to be careful of the context, but the point is that you're allowed to, is it called dissemble? To lie? If that is going to protect the interest of of the host.
Whenever you go to someone's house for Shabbos, people don't ask you how was the food. They ask you what type of food it was. They know already that it's good. They just ask you what type.
What type of food? What are the possibilities?
Yeah.
Chinese or Korean? What? Ashkenazi, Sephardi. Spicy, sweet.
Yeah.
No, again, how? A lot of people ask, how was this? But it depends who you're saying it to, right?
Don't go to the
Like, who's asking? Like, if you know
What?
type of, like...
That they take advantage.
Yeah.
I don't know, because even if he's a good person, but if you got, as a result of this, 100 good people coming knocking the person's doors for hospitality, problem. So you guys are probably familiar with this type of a situation, but there are other examples of it. For example, people collecting money. Hey, did you get any good donations today? Yeah. House 52, 2 blocks down. $100 bill, right? So now he goes and the word's out. Or passing lists of people who have given, right? That's very problematic. That's this type of a thing, right? You're actually, by spreading a list of people who are giving charity, you could be causing harm to these people because they can't afford to give everybody. And now many more people are going to come that they were expecting, and they won't be able to give to everybody. They have to give less or whatever. So you're really not allowed to do that unless you have permission. You're not allowed to do that. What's that? Yeah. And it's a real problem if you have organizations, for example, that pass lists of donors, one to the other. What's that?
When people come collecting, they have drivers that take them out. The people that come, they don't know. They just, we've been in Israel, but the drivers know where to take them.
Yeah. So that would be a scenario where I suppose it is a problem. That's also a problem. The driver is doing a service for the person who needs, but he's getting paid for that as well. So the driver is obviously interested in taking him to the most expensive addresses. So his cut is going to be larger, of course. So he's going to want to know who's giving out the big bucks. If you have more and more drivers on the scene, then they're going to be bringing more and more people around. It's a problem. Some communities might regulate, how many drivers you can have in the community, because everyone going to hop around and start bringing people around all the neighborhood all day long, day and night. The people have no privacy, right? No, it depletes their resources and everything like that. It's a problem, right? So that's the first one is Torah, the second is Uspiza, and the third one is Puria. Puria is one's bed. Isn't allowed to lie in order to conceal what's going on in his private life.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So that if somebody asks something or says something, and in a way, even which would result in his kind of revealing that he was with his wife or he will be with his wife or whatever, so he's actually allowed to lie in order to, keep that away from the other people's attention. And those are the three categories that I mentioned. One Gemara, and another Gemara might be talk about in terms of to preserve shalom, shalom, in order to preserve peace. And one example of that would be shalom bais, for example, and that's what you guys were talking about mentioning in the parsha. Yeah.
Sorry, that was a little bit tough.
Yeah. What Sarah says, I'm going to have children, and my husband's an old man. And the angel says to Avram, your wife is concerned you're not going to have children because of her age. Right? So, right, she said that Avram was old, but the angel presented her words as if she was concerned about her age. So you see from here, the Mishana Mipnei Shalom. Yeah. She says, Adoni Zaken. And the angel said, Ani Zakanti. So, where were we holding? Oh, we were holding by the bell. Burio. Okay. All right. We're going to have to stop here. And the next time we meet, B'ezras Hashem, tomorrow, we'll cover these four things. I see paragraph by paragraph. First is Leitzonos, then so B'ezras Hashem, let's try and finish the chapter tomorrow by the end of the week.